Good evening. And remember, strap yourselves in.
Soak it up. It'll soon be over.
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Suada, Director of the Revelation Perth International Film Festival. Thank you to all of you for joining us for this In Conversation with Christina Callas, Director of the film Paris is in Harlem, which is screening as part of the Revelation Perth International Film Festival. And Christina is talking to us from Greece, so good for you. But look, firstly, congratulations on the film. It's so fantastic. I thought it was just so fresh and I don't know, this is so stylish in every way. So I'm really looking forward to having a chat to you over the next 20 minutes or so about the film. But perhaps before we start, Christina, maybe you might just want to give us a bit of a thumbnail about what the film is about.
Sure. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me and Revelation Perth. Basically, the story, to put it in a nutshell, is the lives of several strangers that are forever changed by a shooting at the historic jazz bar in Harlem, the Paris Blues, on the eve of New York City's no dancing law, which is a law that we had in New York City for almost 91 years and was repealed in November 2017. So it's not really a period film, although it does feel like a period film after 2 years of, pandemic. And that specific bar has closed down, as many establishments in New York. And Sam, that was the inspiration for this film, was one of the first victims of the pandemic in New York, as were many members of the jazz community. And this is a jazz musical, so.
Well, the music in the film is sensational. So I'll get to that in a little while, I think. But the film is told in, well, I'll go back to the story. What drew you to making a film with this story? Are you part of the New York jazz scene, or what brought you to the point of that?
Well, my background is musician. Before I became a filmmaker, I was a musician, but that's many years ago. And I still play music for myself. And I think all my films have this sort of, musical composition style, rather than, I've been a writer, a screenwriter for many years before I became a director. So I feel that I can put together whatever I take apart, you know what I mean? So it's a story, that has several protagonists and several disparate stories that all, converge. And they somehow, they have very strong thematic links at the same time. It is, sort of capturing a moment in time. I think that's what I wanted to do. That's what I set out to do, is to capture a moment in time in this magnificent city of several, of so many languages, not several, I think there's 650, different languages and cultures. And in a moment in time when there is a strong separation between us all, which is due to something which, is great on many levels, which is, each of us trying to find and define our identity. But at the same time, it creates a sense of, we're in identity wars. And mind you, this is a film that I shot. Basically, we finished filming, Richard, a month before the pandemic hit New York. That's, the pandemic sort of topped it off. But it's basically a moment in time before everything that changed our whole lives, the whole world started.
Mm. Well, you captured it beautifully in the movie because there are the cast is very diverse. You know, a whole range of different characters from different backgrounds and that sort of thing. And you captured the mood of the bar, particularly, and its surroundings very, very nicely. It's very atmospheric and very authentic. And I want to
Thank
talk
you.
to you about the authenticity of the film and the characters. But I'm really interested. And when I was watching the film, you were saying before about it's made up of quite a number of characters, and one of the things that that really stood out in the film is that there is a lot of characters in the film, but there's not one really, except for perhaps, and the character name escapes me, of the bartender, that has more weight than the others. They all have a very similar weighting in the story, so they all have an equality, an equal voice within the story. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the layering of
Yes.
the film and how that came to be.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is exactly what I'm doing, Richard. You know, all my films are about sort of challenging that idea that one of us is more important than the others. So, you know, the sort of the traditional protagonist structure where we're following one character go against all odds, sort of, you know, a dramatic sort of, you know, distillate of real life is kind of not really corresponding to how I perceive the world and how I can express, you know, artistically what I perceive. So for me, working on this idea, and this is something that started, you know, like many, many years ago. It's my third feature film, and the third feature film that I made in New York in the last 7 to 8 years. So so basically, it's they all serve the same idea. It's something that I call inclusive cinema, and that's basically, you know, the idea that we're all protagonists, and there's something to the simultaneous perception of our different points of view on one and the same event, for instance, that that kind of creates truth, because what we call truth, as seen from the eyes of one person, even if it's the filmmaker, is just not enough. It's just not complex enough. It doesn't correspond to the complexity of real life. And there's another thing, you know, that connects to your previous question, which is I feel that words have sort of have sort of reached their limits in terms of our understanding each other. And I mean, the cinematic language is already going a step further. You know, it's a more universal language because it's not just using words. But in a way, you know, what the story that the film is telling is that it's music that brings everybody together. You know, it's kind of, they talk their hearts out, they hit walls, you know, like we all do. And then there's something about the music that takes them away, and that, you know, sort of that happiness of being alive. And you know, there's something in the magic of musical notes, and of jazz in particular, which I consider the biggest contribution of America to the world. That it's the world culture. You know, there's something about that which is kind of taking us to another level, and we need to be taken to another level. The conversations we're having are extremely important. It's extremely important that we start seeing things and also start looking at our past in a different way, but we also need to move this to a different level, you know?
Tell us about how, because as I said, the film is, the characterizations in the film are really authentic. And the locations are authentic and real, but the relationships feel really genuine, which gives the film so much warmth and humor and not danger, but, you know, excitement. So tell us about how you drew those performances out of the cast.
Yes, that's a great question, because it sort of goes directly to my process, as we call it, which is, you know, I use a method which I call writer's improv method, which was developed, you know, many years ago as a writer, actually. And basically, it's an approach that has been used in the past in different forms, by Cassavetes, by Oldman, by Mike Lee, and it kind of it's a bigger freedom, if you want, with the written word on one hand. But what is the core of what I'm doing is basically I work with the actors. I workshop my screenplay the same way that we workshop plays in the theater. You know, so different than, for instance, Mike Lee, who was a colleague of mine at the German Film and Television Academy in Berlin when I was teaching there. Different than him, I start with a finished screenplay. And then I kind of, you know, workshop that screenplay. I work with the actors. I sort of do the whole casting process during that workshop. And I do the rehearsing process during that workshop. And it kind of, it helps me sort of study my actors, or these new creatures that come out of the merging of an actor and a character. So that the moment when we're actually on set and we start filming, the character is the actor and the actor is the character. And it kind of, you know, allows me to get this, you know, lived in performances that you're talking about, where you have the feeling you're in a documentary, you know, and it's effortless, and, you know, nobody has to say a line and stand on that spot and deliver the line from, you know, several times till, you know, everything is fine. But obviously, you know, I do several takes, and there's, you know, there's specific elements that we don't have the time to go into depth with, but you know, the main idea is that basically there's only one way for this character to be, and I work with the actors up to that point where they are that character, and they also know each other. It's a world, you know, through the workshop they become a family. We all become a family. So this familiarity, this feeling of, you know, we're sort of, this is real, this is authentic, is a very sort of, you know, is the thing that I'm aiming for before I start shooting.
With that and that workshopping process, did you do that? Did you do the workshopping, you know, on location? So, you know, people the actors were familiar with those locations?
No, that's not possible. That's not possible. I mean, locations are for me characters, which is really interesting because my next feature film is 80% set to be shot in a studio. So, you know, we'll see how I'll do with that. But there is something about the locations that kind of meets the characters, that creates another chemistry. But the whole process of the workshopping cannot be done, of course, in the location, because the location is a real bar. You know, it's amazing that Sam gave me the opportunity to shoot there, but I couldn't, of course, you know, block the bar also for the workshop. But I do, you know, for instance, every time I was meeting somebody, we would meet in the bar, you know, so they're familiar with the bar, you know, even, you know, the cinematography. Obviously, we did everything to make everyone familiar with the bar, which is the main location, because, you know, don't forget, you know, 50% of the film is shot outside. It's, you know, in different locations in New York, and exterior locations. The city of New York is a character as well. But yes, no, the bar came, you know, we started filming in the bar. You know, we went into the bar on the first day of principal photography.
Well, tell us about the stylistic approach to the film, because it's not necessarily always like full screen and that sort of thing. Often there is like split screens and 4 screens and 4 points of view at any one time, and you know, that's a very strong you know, statement, you know, aesthetic statement. So tell us, did that kind of emerge? Did you have that in your mind from the very beginning of the even before you started shooting the movie, or did that come to you kind of as you were in the post-production or at some point in the movie? How did that come
Yeah,
out?
yeah. No, thank you for the question. No, it's something that is also part of my language as a filmmaker. So I actually started experimenting with that on my first film, 42 Seconds of Happiness, and I did a little bit of that, and it kind of, it served this idea of there's all these different storylines that are equal in my head, and that should be heard simultaneously. There's something about the simultaneous perception of different aspects and different emotions. So, I experimented with that on my first film, and then it became, I really enjoyed the conversation and the perception of the audience, and the idea that each audience member watches a different film, when they basically, perceive this, I call it vertical editing, because basically there's a lot of work that goes into sort of this correlation between those different storylines once they come simultaneously. And there's something amazing about that when you have a conversation with the audience, and you realize that each perceive different things out of those split screens. And an interesting detail is that Lois Weber, who is the first female filmmaker, just as important as D.W. Griffith, only film history treats her differently, that she was experimenting on split screens. And it sort of went into horizontal editing as the parallel editing, as we call it, as the established method of telling stories in film, has also to do, of course, with a very expensive aspect of doing that with film, which is now, digital editing sort of frees us, liberates us, but also has to do with the fact that maybe, there's a different wiring of the mind, and there's something about multiple screens, which is very actual. Richard, I mean, when we started Zooming, I mean, now we're in a split screen now. When the pandemic hit and everybody started Zooming, my collaborators were all texting me and saying, we're all in Kala's world now. and it was just, it just felt like, we were suddenly all in split screens. And that's, that's I've been experimenting for 3 films now with sort of how to achieve how to achieve the most effect out of it. You can do several things with split screens. You can sort of break the linearity of time, because you can be in the past and in the future and in the present at the same time. You can break the emotional barriers, because there's that you can react to the same thing in different ways, and you can sort of put them side by side and see how that is. You can have different stories with equal validity sort of play out at the same time, and then you can do the traditional use of split screens, which is to show what happens to another character when the character that you're following now, or to do transitions. Many filmmakers have used that in such a way, but there are filmmakers like, for instance, Brian De Palma, who have really experimented with vertical editing and have done extreme sort of have used it in terms of storytelling in extreme ways. And I kind of studied them a lot over the years, and I kind of sort of like to think of my films sort of pushing the envelope a little bit further and sort of trying different things out. And yeah.
Well, you can certainly see that in the film. And I think with the split screens as well, there's a fracture in it, the things are fractured from the linear path, but also a sense of symmetry as well when they come together, like, the squares suddenly become a complete, and so there's a really nice play with the audience with that as well.
Right.
Yeah, and they also remind me.
And I mean, in this film particularly, it's like, it's like jazz improvisation, right? It's like, they come together, like in I hope this parallel comes through, that you have the feeling that the band plays together, and there's a harmony or a disharmony to that, and then one of the instruments takes the melody and goes off, so there's another level here which is specific to this film.
Yeah, there's a lot of riffing in the movie. There's no question about it, where, the directions just suddenly flip. But how do you explain that kind of thing to a cinematographer? What was your kind of, you know, how did you get that out of your head and into someone else's eye?
Right. Right. Well, you know, it's interesting because I'm writing the split screens into the screen, into my screenplays. So basically, you know, I know in which areas I want to have, because what you need is you need additional footage, right? You need a certain kind of footage to be able to have it when you're editing. So the cinematographer is not so much the challenge, because, you know, since I write it into my screenplays, and then we discuss, you know, when we do our shot lists and so on, what is going to, you know, what we're going to need. And sometimes there's surprises. Sometimes, you know, even if you haven't written a split screen into the screenplay, you find an opportunity while editing, which is kind of interesting. So let's try this out. Maybe there's something there which you know, which will be interesting to do, that I wasn't planning it initially. And I mean, for instance, I believe that, I'm not so sure, but I believe that the one on the bridge was not in the screenplay. You know, maybe I decided to do it on spot while filming, but basically this idea that but the idea was that they are constantly, you know, talking with each other and very close, you know. And I think because of the way that the footage turned out, that what we ended up doing was this concept of, you know, the communication breaks and then they reconnect. The communication breaks, then they reconnect, and that's an additional, you know, sort of level of metaphor, you know, if you want, in the decision to edit it this way. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting. I'm filming for. I mean, I talked about my next project, which is in financing now, but and in casting. But between that and now, I'm going to film a limited series, which is not written by me. So for the first time, I'm directing something which was written by somebody else, and therefore the split screens are not in the script. So it will be interesting. That would be an interesting challenge to see, you know, what I can do with that, and how this is going to translate into you know, into my style. And I'm not saying, you know, everything needs to be that way, but what I'm saying is that there is an element in our hands as filmmakers which we haven't used, you know.
And with the film itself on the film festival circuit, had that you know, how's it been going? Have you had a pretty good life with it on the circuit?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's because of the nature of my films, you know, it's like, it's not the traditional sort of, you know, many films have this, okay, it's a star driven, it's, you know, it focuses on one star, and, you know, it's a very different way of working on all levels, you know, starting with the script and ending with the film's distribution and promotion. So, you know, through the years, I kind of there's like an audience that grows, and internationally that sort of, you know, have been following what I'm doing. And with each film, I think, you know, we go into a higher level, and it's been, you know, I mean, already the Rainbow Experiment, which was my previous film, traveled in, I think, you know, 5 continents. It was in China. Some of the investors in my current film were, you know, go back to that film screening in China, and it's just amazing how you know, how life works, isn't it? And I think, you know, it's, for me, it's fascinating, and it's something that I've missed enormously during the pandemic. It's fascinating. Festivals are, you know, a wonderful place to be as a filmmaker, because you have this direct conversation with the audience, and you cannot really replicate that online. I mean, not, this feeling of sort of conversing with 200 people in a cinema. It's amazing. So yes, the film premiered in its own country, in the US, at Slamdance as part of Breakouts, which is a section that few people know, or that's pretty new at Slamdance, which kind of sort of follows the work of directors beyond their first and second films, for which Slamdance is really well known for. This past January, and it did really well. I mean, we got amazing reviews, and then it moved on. It had its German premiere last week in Munich, the Munich Film Festival. It is having its Irish premiere tonight in Galway, and due to the whole, travel and chaos at the moment, I wasn't able to go. So I'm really sad about that, and happy to be talking about the film today with you. And then it's going, it's Revelation Perth, and then there's more plans which I cannot announce yet.
Well, look, congratulations on the film. I think it's great. As I said, it's so fresh, and it's got such a spark to it. And every element of it is, like what we said at the beginning, is so balanced. So congratulations on the work. Best of luck with the future of the film. I think it'll have a really, really good life on the film festival circuit. I think it's a very hard film to resist. It's just, it really speaks very authentically, musically and performatively and creatively. So congratulations on that. We're going to have to wrap it up, unfortunately, though, Christina, but thank you so much for your time. I can't wait for your next movie, and really best of luck with it all. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for having me. And yes, I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation at some other point. Thank you so much.
It's a real pleasure. We'll talk soon, hopefully. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.